Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Renny.
Hi, I'm Sara.
And I'm Josh. I'm going to take off these Murakami glasses. These are actually Tori's. We went on a field trip, and Tori left these in the car, so I thought I would try these on. They do look pretty, like I have no idea where I'm going.
They're very stylish, but maybe you can't see too well on them.
You think so?
Oh, they're cool. Cool.
They may look cool, but I look like I'm from a Haruki Murakami novel.
They look like
But
outer space.
Haruki Murakami is an Eastern writer. But first of all, I want to thank Professor Hartman for letting us film at
You're
her
very
house.
welcome.
Thank you.
This is a very cozy looking place. But back to Haruki Murakami is an Eastern writer. We're going to be going over somebody that was highly inspired by Eastern culture, and especially Eastern philosophy, and that is Hermann Hesse. And the book that we will be discussing today is Steppenwolf. We went over Demian back in Season 5, and we went over Journey to the East back in Season 8. The discussion starter I have for this discussion is, as per the author's note, Hesse makes mention to the fact that this book and the Steppenwolf are often misinterpreted. How do you perceive the Steppenwolf?
It's my second read after a long gap. I read it probably in 1968, a long time ago. He was very big among the counterculture, and of course, part of the book is, sex, drug, not rock and roll, but jazz.
Mm-hmm.
A tremendous amount about music. I'm not exactly sure what he means when he says the book is misinterpreted. He seems to be in the same position of Eliot's Prufrock in many ways, because he's 50, he's feeling middle-aged, he's not feeling with things, and all of a sudden he begins to discover young people who are, and this opens him up to a whole new world. But he is very grounded in the classics.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tremendous amount about classical music, which is really terrific. So I don't know how people would misinterpret it or not take it correctly. His books tend to reflect his life and his progress as he goes through life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this one it's very much like Demian, where it's a lot about himself and his personal reflections, because Emil Sinclair was the name that he wrote under, so technically that's a reflection of himself. And then Harry Holler, his initials.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He uses a major character in Journey to the East is H.H. So he is known for doing that, especially in his later novels when he is a Swiss resident. His earlier novels take on a different tune, but interesting that you mentioned the jazz. Jazz seemed to have that impact the way that rock and roll did.
Oh yes.
Some decades
Yes.
later.
Well, the big thing is, one of the big things is he gets gramophones so we can play records. I mean, that is the beginning of commercial entertainment and the platter record. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's. I mean, jazz was what the rebels listened to.
Yes.
Rock and roll back
Yes.
come the 50s, that was what the rebels
Yes.
Go out in the middle of the
listened
night.
to.
Yes, go out in the middle of the night.
And it wasn't until 1963 when rock and roll really became
Above ground.
above ground
Yes.
and took over the
Yes.
the billboards and
Part of that
the charts
was
here.
majorly was the Beatles and the British invasion, even though they were all based on
Yeah.
American rock.
That was
It
that was a
very
year later,
very
in 64.
underground. It was
that
very
they
underground.
invaded.
If you look at the top 10 recordings and say 59, 60, 61, 62, they tend not to be rock records.
Nope. Number one in 1960 was Theme from a Summer Place by Percy Faith. 62 was depending on which chart you look at, either I Can't Stop Loving You by Ray Charles or Stranger on the Shore by Mr. Actor Bilk. And then 1958 was It's All in the Game by Tommy Edwards.
Yeah, and they are, for the most part, slow music and very middle-of-the-road music.
It's easy listening.
Easy listening music, yes.
That they would be more likely to be found on Warren's Welk as opposed to...
In some ways, yes.
But,
so his discovery of jazz, his discovery of nightclubs, his discovery of the sexual revolution from the 20s, well, that's the first wave of feminism coming in the 1920s. His relationship with Hermione, who was a daughter figure, sort of, also lover figure, motherly, leader of the pack.
Hermione was an interesting figure that not only served as an opportunity for Holler to loosen up, but I think she also served as a test, because she would teach him all of these things, teach him how to loosen up, but then she told him that afterwards that he had to kill her.
Yeah. Oh yes, well I thought the thing that was the most interesting is that she didn't immediately have sex with him. She passed him off to somebody else, but she insisted that he learn to dance, and she gave him dance lessons, and that was very, very rigid. You must dance.
The foxtrot.
Yes, you must dance.
What did you think was the major message of?
So this is the only work I've read of him, and I've only read through this once. I'm really curious of if his other works talk so much about. Well, this is a very spiritual novel talking about philosophy, but if his other books also were kind of like a self-reflection of himself, where they talked about depression and suicide and how he did, and I guess how someone who's getting older, they forget about all these people they've met and all these feelings they've had and all these relationships they've had, and it just feels like everything has just come to an empty, meaningless stillness, and it feels as if there's no meaning to life, and you see all these people going around doing all these things, and they seem happy, and then you say how much you don't understand them, or they're getting such pleasure out of such simple things. Then when you actually go out and do it, you feel the complete opposite. You're so eager to do the same things that they're doing, and this is what, by the end of the novel, he was on the extreme end of it, doing the drugs and the sex, and
I think he started out very intense, but then I think the major moral to this is not to take life seriously. I think that as per the second to page 217, Pablo told him that you did what you did, but you disappoint. And I quote, "You have disappointed me a little. You forgot yourself badly. You broke through the humor of my little theater and tried to make a mess of it, stabbing with knives and spattering our pretty picture world with the mud of reality."
Well, the whole thing at the end with the circus, but that was the thing. If you listen to a lot of rock from the late '60s and '70s, especially in Led Zeppelin and so forth, the whole thing is to lose control, and certainly that circus business is about just going mad, just being absolutely crazy, losing all of everything.
Yep, that's what the purpose of the theater was, for madmen only.
Yes.
The magic theater for madmen only.
Right, for madmen.
But he took it a little too seriously and killed Hermione when she was having sex with Alexander.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure in the sense that she's really dead, because Pablo picks her up and she turns into a chess piece and he puts her in her pocket. So I don't know if that's hallucinogenic.
That's the whole point of the theater, is the whole...
so whether she's really dead, she did tell him to kill her.
And that's why he did it. He did it based off of her wishes.
Yeah, he wanted to obey her orders.
Yeah.
That was his
he
sole
was
purpose.
obeying her orders.
And so no matter how morally wrong that could be, to just kill someone. That's what she wanted, and that
Well,
was...
there's that whole episode where they got up in the tree and they were shooting people as
Yeah,
they
that's in the
drove by.
cars,
Yes, I
yeah.
thought that was. I was reading that as we had El Paso and Dayton. That was not a good piece in there for that.
No.
But yes, the whole thing was to have no judgment.
Mm-hmm. And I think, for me, I think that it benefits much more to read it multiple times, because before the session I was reading particular excerpts, and I think that it really had a lot to say about our world in general, because it very much it explores the two, what they say are the two selves, the human intellectual and the wolf-like aggression that we have, but at the same time to denote that humans are one way and wolves are another way. There are so many different ways that you can dissect them as far as their temperament is concerned, because we have multiple personalities just as animals do.
Right.
It's not like you can only equate ones. It's that whole...
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't equate one idea to one animal.
It's very easy to put something in a box, and then he slowly realizes that it's not one soul you have, it's many people's souls.
Yes, and the fact that innocence is nothing more than a stained glass that's inevitably going to be broken through. So.
Well, that's like Jekyll and Hyde. It is the dual nature, and yes, because we have a cerebral cortex and can communicate by talking and writing, which most animals don't do, but our basic nature is still animal, because otherwise we wouldn't be here if we weren't animals.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. Do we have any other thoughts?
Did you like the book?
I didn't like it as much this time around as I did the very first time I read it. I can remember being really enthusiastic about it. That's a long time ago, but I think that was also a part of that time in the 60s that he became a big writer among college students and anybody who was reading, and we were readers. I am unfortunately disappointed that I don't think that reading today is as big an activity for most people as it used to be. But there was a huge influence on young people and the arts and the media, definitely.
I personally, after reading it a first time, I personally felt that Demian did more with less as far as Hesse and his quest for enlightenment and his use of Eastern philosophy was concerned. But I personally think that Steppenwolf was a pretty challenging piece to delve into, but I still think that it had fascinating messages that when I look into it more, it's something that I definitely want to.
I would say
revisit.
the major problem with my second reading was that I think we hadn't had the 70s and the me generation yet when I read it. We have now been so through discovering yourself, experimenting, taking this drug, taking that drug, going this place, going that place, having this husband, having that wife, having back and forth so many times, finding yourself. That was new at the time. It was certainly new in the 20s. But I think we've been through that cycle so much that it doesn't quite have the impact that it had at one time.
So a work can age every now and then. There's some that are unable to last the test of time. The way that, granted, you have even the Beats generation. You see that as something where they're very straightforward, and I think people pick that up and read it and realize what that there's no boundaries as far as literature is concerned. Perhaps there's a bit of boundary here because of everything that has taken place in transition. But
Well, yes. Well, he comes to a finish.
Yep.
He does come to a finish. He's a changed person, but he does come to a finish.
And he plans to give it another shot when his sentence is through.
Like, I definitely want to read through this a second time, and it's so much of the book, at least like the first like half or like 3/4, it's mostly dissecting the thoughts of the Steppenwolf and his philosophies and how he feels about life and who he is. And even though, like, you know, that for that was like 200 pages before really
Anything
the
happens.
not the masquerade,
Yes.
the ball
Yes.
happened at the end. But even so, like, it kept me reading it. Some of it was definitely hard to get through, but it didn't seem it wasn't just random words explaining things. Like, it kept like stringing and chaining together. It kept me interested. And if you didn't know all these complicated thoughts of who he was, the end wouldn't really mean much. Or when stuff actually happening, like, it wouldn't really mean much. Like, why do we care about this guy who just lives upstairs in this room and just doesn't really do anything? And then it starts meaning more.
Well, we didn't talk about that. That's kind of interesting with the structure, because it's an as told to, because I found this writing that Haller produced.
Yeah, the records of Harry
Right, the
Haller.
records, yes. So we get a double first person.
Right.
Yeah, but you only get the first person for the first 20.
Chapter.
Yeah, the first
yes.
chapter for up to page 22, and then you get the Harry Haller's.
And then you get to
record.
the tract of stuff.
So
Yeah,
how
sorry.
you first?
Went from a person to a book to a person. It went a lot of places, and it wasn't confusing either.
No.
But it had such a strange structure that surprisingly worked, and it was so misbalanced. But I have to say I kind of enjoyed it. It kind of worked.
Okay, how would we rate it on a 0 to 5 scale with half stars permitted? Renny?
Oh, I would definitely give it an 8.5. He's a very, very well-known author, and his works have held up over the years. He definitely should be part of reading.
8.5 out of 5?
Oh, I thought we were going to,
I thought it was that good.
3.5 out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have to say also a 3.5. Just for it was parts were a little difficult to get through, and I'm still processing what this entire book meant in general. I'm gonna have to give it a second reading, and it might mean something different to me like years on.
I'm going. I originally was going to give it a 3.5 as well, but I bumped it up to a 4 because I'm overrating Hesse again. I'm usually known for doing that because I think that there are messages looking into this that are very meaningful and long-lasting. I think that I think that there are works that are better, like his Demian and Robert Walser's Jacob von Gutten, which explore very similar things, but they do it with less. And even though this is only 218 pages, I thought this was much longer, but it really isn't. If you are interested in reading, here is a copy of the Picador version. Allegedly, Larry said this looks like Chewbacca's backside. So,
Well, that's not what I have.
I have a 389-page mini book. If you don't like to squint, this might not be your first choice.
So,
Mine looks like Picasso, which would have been his era.
oh, that does look pretty. That does look a little bit trippy.
Yeah, it's,
But,
I don't know.
thank you for tuning in to this discussion, and be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.